The funeral flowers arrived on a Tuesday, a massive, ostentatious wreath of white lilies, the kind you send when you want to make a public show of grief. The card read, "In loving memory of a dear mother." The problem was, I was standing right there in my living room, very much alive, staring at them. An hour later, my phone began to ring. It was my oldest friend, sobbing, offering her condolences. Confused, I went online, and there it was, my own obituary, posted on my daughter-in-law's popular social media page. It was a beautiful, heart-wrenching tribute to a beloved mother-in-law who passed away peacefully in her sleep. It was accompanied by a GoFundMe link to help with her final expenses. It had already raised over $10,000. I wasn't dead. But my daughter-in-law, a woman who lived with me, who saw me that very morning, had just announced my death to the world. I didn't know then if it was a sick joke, a bizarre mistake, or something far more sinister. I only knew one thing. If she wanted me dead so badly, I was more than happy to oblige. I would become the most proactive, most vengeful ghost she could ever imagine. My name is Margaret, and I am 70 years old. Until that Tuesday, my life had been one of quiet, unassuming service. I was a nurse for 40 years. My husband, David, a kind and gentle man, passed away 3 years ago, leaving me with a beautiful, paid-for home and a modest but very substantial investment portfolio he had quietly built for our retirement. Our only son, Thomas, was my world. But a year ago, he married Amelia. Amelia was a social media wellness influencer. She was beautiful, charismatic, and had a smile that could charm a snake. She also had an ambition as vast and as cold as the Arctic Ocean. After their wedding, they moved in with me. "Just until we save up for our own place, Mom," Thomas had said. But I soon realized their idea of saving up was spending my money on their lavish lifestyle. Amelia saw my comfortable, upper-middle-class life not as the result of a lifetime of hard work and careful planning, but as a personal treasure chest she was entitled to. My home became the backdrop for her sponsored posts. My kitchen was used for her healthy cooking videos. She never washed a dish. My savings account became an endless well for her wellness retreats to Bali and her collection of designer yoga pants. I tolerated it. I loved my son, and I saw how utterly infatuated he was with her. He was a good boy, but he was weak, completely mesmerized by her charm. He stood by silently as she treated me with a growing, passive-aggressive contempt. I went from being the matriarch of my home to an unpaid assistant in her lifestyle brand. The week before the obituary, things had escalated. I had been in my lawyer's office, finalizing my will. David had always been insistent that our finances be structured to protect our legacy. I wanted to leave the house to Thomas, but the bulk of my investment portfolio, a sum of nearly $5 million that no one but me and my lawyer knew about, was to be split between a children's hospital and a trust fund for my future grandchildren. I made the mistake of mentioning the lawyer's visit at dinner. I saw a flicker of something in Amelia's eyes, a greedy, calculating light. "A will?" she'd chirped, her voice sweet as honey. "That's so organized of you, Margaret. You should make sure Thomas is the executor. He's so good with money. I just smiled noncommittally. I knew Thomas was not good with money. He was good at spending it. Amelia was the one who was good with money, specifically my money. And then, a week later, I was dead. Or at least dead to the world. After the initial shock of seeing my own death announced online, a cold, terrifying clarity washed over me. This wasn't a mistake. This was a plan. This was step one in a scheme to seize control of my assets. She thought I was a frail, technologically illiterate old woman. She thought she could declare me dead, collect the fraudulent GoFundMe money, and then, when I inevitably reappeared, confused and distressed, she could use the incident as proof that I was senile and mentally incompetent, a danger to myself and my own finances. It was a diabolical, but admittedly clever, plan. She was trying to gaslight me into my own grave. I looked at the beautiful, lying tribute she had written about me online. She was the kindest soul, a beacon of light. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. I didn't confront her. I didn't scream or cry. I made a single phone call. It was to my nephew, a tech genius in another state who owed me for his college tuition. "Alex," I said, my voice calm and steady, "I need your help. I need to become a ghost." Then I packed a small bag, walked out my back door, and disappeared. I took a taxi to a small, nondescript hotel across town. From my anonymous room, I watched the drama unfold online. The condolences poured in. The GoFundMe donations skyrocketed. My son, my poor, foolish Thomas, posted a tearful message about his devastating loss. A message I knew Amelia had written for him. They were performing their grief for a global audience, completely unaware that the deceased was watching them from a hotel room, sipping tea, and planning her resurrection. Amelia thought she was burying me. She had no idea she was actually planting a seed. The seed of a revenge so epic, so public, and so satisfying, it would become a legend. The useless old woman was dead. A vengeful phantom was about to be born. From my anonymous hotel room, which I dubbed Ghost Central, I orchestrated the first phase of my haunting. The internet, the very tool Amelia used as her weapon, was now about to become mine. With my nephew Alex's remote help, I became a digital phantom, a ghost in her machine. First, the GoFundMe. Amelia had raised over $50,000 in less than 48 hours from my grieving friends and her legion of online followers. The sympathy was a tidal wave. "So sorry for your loss, Amelia. Your mother-in-law sounded like an angel. Sending love and light during this difficult time. She raised a wonderful son." "Alex," I said over an encrypted call, "I want to redirect that grief and that money." Alex worked his magic. He found the contact information for the head of the pediatric oncology ward, where I had been a volunteer nurse for over 20 years. I sent an anonymous, encrypted email from a friend of Margaret, explaining that Margaret's final wish was for all memorial donations to go directly to the hospital. The email included the link to Amelia's GoFundMe. The hospital, of course, was thrilled and immediately posted a public thank you on their own social media, tagging Amelia. We are so moved by the incredible generosity of @Amelia Lifestyles and her followers in honoring the memory of our beloved volunteer, Margaret. These funds will bring so much joy to our children. The effect was immediate. Amelia's followers, believing they were contributing to a legitimate memorial fund, flooded the hospital's page with praise for her selfless act. Wow, Amelia, not only are you grieving, but you're also thinking of the children. You are a true inspiration. I watched from my hotel room as Amelia was forced to play along. I could imagine her rage, her beautiful face contorting in a silent scream as she saw the money she had grifted being publicly rerouted. She posted a tearful video, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. My mother-in-law loved that hospital so much, she said, her voice thick with fake emotion. It's what she would have wanted. I am just so overwhelmed by your support. She had to publicly announce that she was donating the entire sum to the hospital. She was trapped in her own lie. Next, the funeral. Amelia, needing to maintain the facade, had scheduled a memorial service for the end of the week. She had booked the most expensive funeral home in the city, planning a grand spectacle to cement her image as the grieving, devoted daughter-in-law. Alex, I said, let's make some adjustments. Alex, the digital specter, got to work. He hacked into the funeral home's online portal. The lavish casket Amelia had chosen was downgraded to the simplest pine box. The enormous, expensive flower arrangements were replaced with a single, tasteful bouquet of my favorite daisies. The catering order for champagne and gourmet canapés was changed to coffee and simple cookies. And the guest list, he added a few names. The entire board of directors for the Children's Hospital, a respected journalist from the city's main newspaper whom I knew personally. And for the final touch, a professional grief counseling group that specialized in sudden family loss. The day of my own funeral was beautiful and sunny. I watched the live stream from my hotel room, an experience I can only describe as surreal. The funeral home was packed. Amelia and Thomas stood at the front, dressed in elegant black, greeting the mourners. I could see the confusion on Amelia's face as she noticed the simple casket and the lack of ostentatious flowers. The service began. People got up to share their memories of me, my friends, my old colleagues from the hospital. They spoke of my kindness, my quiet strength, my years of service. Then, the journalist I had invited, a sharp woman named Sarah, got up to speak. I knew Margaret for many years, she began, and while I am heartbroken by her sudden passing, I am also confused. I had coffee with her just 2 weeks ago. She was vibrant, healthy, and was talking about her plans to travel to Italy this year. Her death seems so unexpected. Has an official cause of death been determined? A ripple of confusion went through the crowd. Amelia, standing at the front, went pale. She hadn't thought that far ahead. She hadn't considered the need for a death certificate, an autopsy, the actual legalities of death. She had only planned the social media campaign. Before she could answer, the director of the Children's Hospital stood up. We at the hospital are also in shock, he said. Margaret was the heart of our volunteer program. We are so grateful for the donations, but we also feel her loss keenly. In her honor, we would like to announce the creation of the Margaret Vance Wing for Pediatric Care. funded by the generous donations from all of you, facilitated by her loving daughter-in-law, Amelia. He began to lead a round of applause for Amelia. She was forced to stand there, smiling through gritted teeth, as the crowd applauded her for giving away the money she had tried to steal. It was a masterpiece of public humiliation. I sat in my hotel room, a quiet smile on my face. Amelia thought she was the star of this tragic play. She had no idea she was just a puppet and a ghost was pulling the strings. The funeral was a success. My funeral. But this was just the overture. The real opera of her destruction was about to begin. The funeral was a public relations disaster for Amelia. The journalists' pointed questions about a cause of death had planted a seed of doubt. The internet, once her adoring kingdom, began to whisper. It is strange, isn't it? She seemed so healthy. Why no mention of a cause of death or an autopsy? Amelia, sensing she was losing control of the narrative, went into damage control. She posted another tearful video. For those asking, she said, her voice a perfect symphony of sorrow. We are respecting Margaret's final wishes for a simple, private passing. She did not want an autopsy. She wanted to be remembered as she was. The grief is overwhelming, and these questions are so painful for our family. It was a brilliant performance. It bought her some time, but she was bleeding, and the sharks were circling, and I was about to release the Kraken. My husband David had not just been a kind man, he had been a financial genius. He knew that after his death, I would be vulnerable. He had structured his will and our assets in a way that was a legal fortress with a single, secret key. That key was our lawyer, Mr. Gable, a man who had served my family for 50 years, with a loyalty as fierce as a bulldog's. From my hotel room, I made the call. Mr. Gable, I said, it's Margaret. I believe you have a letter for me. From David. Margaret, he said, his voice filled with relief. My God, we've been so worried. The news, we thought. Thank God. Yes. I have the letter. I was instructed to open it only under a very specific set of circumstances. I believe a fraudulent declaration of your death qualifies. The letter, which he read to me over a secure line, was David's final act of love and protection. It laid out a plan, a scorched earth protocol to be enacted if his beloved, but tragically naive son ever fell under the influence of a predatory and unscrupulous spouse. The plan had a name, the Matriarch Protocol. It was simple in its genius. Almost all our assets, the house, the stocks, the bonds, the secret $5 million portfolio, were not in my name. They were held in a complex, ironclad family trust. I was the sole trustee with absolute control. But Thomas and his spouse, Amelia, were the primary beneficiaries. They received a generous monthly stipend, the source of their lavish life. They believed they were living off the interest of a vast fortune they would one day inherit. But the Matriarch Protocol contained a kill switch. David had included a clause, a legal time bomb. It stated that if any beneficiary of the trust were found to have acted in a way that was maliciously detrimental to the physical, financial, or emotional well-being of the primary trustee, me, then the trustee had the right to immediately and irrevocably terminate their beneficiary status. Amelia hadn't just posted a fake obituary. She had signed her own financial death warrant. "Mr. Gable," I said, my voice cold and clear, "I want to trigger the protocol, but not yet. The timing must be perfect. I want her to feel safe. I want her to believe she has won. I want her to climb to the very top of her mountain of lies, just so I can enjoy watching her fall." "I understand completely," Mr. Gable said, a grim satisfaction in his voice. "Let me know when. We will be ready." My return from the dead had to be as carefully orchestrated as my disappearance. I couldn't just walk back into the house. Amelia would use my reappearance to prove her point, that I was a confused, wandering old woman. So I started the second phase of my haunting, the gaslighting of the gaslighter. With Alex's help, I began to subtly manipulate the smart home system Amelia had insisted on installing, a system she controlled with her phone and was so proud of. The thermostat would mysteriously drop to a frigid 60 degrees in the middle of the night. The smart speakers would, at 3 a.m., begin to softly play my favorite classical music, Chopin's nocturnes, the ones I always played while I was knitting. The lights in my old bedroom, which had been dark for a week, would flicker on and off at random hours. I watched her descent into paranoia through the very security cameras she had installed to monitor me. I saw her waking up in the middle of the night, wrapping a blanket around herself, her face a mask of confusion and fear. I saw her screaming at the smart speakers to stop playing the creepy music. I saw her talking to Thomas, her voice frantic. "The house is acting weird, Tom. It's like she's still here." "It's just a glitch in the system, Amy," he'd say, ever the fool. "I'll call a technician." But the technicians could find nothing wrong. The haunting became more personal. Amelia had a massive walk-in closet, a temple to her own vanity, filled with hundreds of pairs of designer shoes. I had Alex hack into her online shopping accounts. We started sending back her most recent, most expensive purchases. A pair of $2,000 heels would arrive, and the next day, a return notification would appear in her email, stating the item had been sent back. She would tear her closet apart, looking for the shoes, convinced she was losing her mind. The final beautiful touch was the garden, my roses. I had the local florist, a woman who adored me, deliver a single, perfect white rose to the house every single morning, with a simple, anonymous card that read, "Thinking of you." It was the same rose David used to leave on my pillow every morning. I watched on the camera as Amelia found the first rose on the doorstep. She was confused. The second day, she was annoyed. By the fifth day, she was utterly terrified. She was being haunted not by a ghost, but by a relentless, inescapable kindness that she could not understand. She was starting to unravel. She was living in my house, but it was no longer her home. It was my haunted house, and she was the one trapped inside. Her confidence was cracking, her arrogance replaced by a growing, gnawing fear. She was exactly where I wanted her. The stage was set for the final public act of her destruction. While Amelia was slowly being driven mad by flickering lights and phantom roses, Gable and I were preparing the main event. The centerpiece of my revenge wasn't just about reclaiming my life. It was about destroying hers. And Amelia's life, her entire identity, was built on one thing: her social media brand, her image as a wellness guru, and an aspirational lifestyle icon. We were about to burn that image to the ground. Amelia had a massive upcoming brand deal, the biggest of her career, a multi-million-dollar contract to be the face of a new luxury holistic wellness company called Elysian. She had been working on securing it for months. The deal was to be announced at a huge, glamorous launch party in a week's time. Her entire future, the life of luxury she had been grifting towards, depended on this. "This is our target," I told Mr. Gable. "I don't just want my money back. I want to see her empire of lies turn to ash in front of her adoring fans." Mr. Gable, with the resources of a top-tier law firm, began a deep dive into Elysian. It didn't take long to find the cracks. The company was a house of cards. Their revolutionary wellness products were nothing more than snake oil, backed by junk science. The founder was a charismatic charlatan who had a history of failed ventures and angry investors. They were desperate for a credible spokesperson to give them an air of legitimacy. Amelia, with her huge following and carefully crafted image of authenticity, was their golden ticket. The plan was simple, elegant, and utterly devastating. We would let her have her moment in the sun. We would let her stand on that stage, sign that contract, and bask in the applause. And then, at the peak of her triumph, we would pull the rug out from under her, publicly and spectacularly. I made a call to the journalist, Sarah, the one who had asked the awkward questions at my funeral. I told her a carefully edited version of the story. I told her that my daughter-in-law, in a state of distress and confusion, had made a terrible mistake in announcing my death, and that I had been recovering in a private facility. I told her that I was concerned about Amelia's recent erratic behavior and the new company she was associating with. I gave her the breadcrumbs of the Elysian investigation. "There's a big story here, Sarah," I said. "A much bigger story than a fake obituary. Be at the Elysian launch party and have your cameras ready." The night of the party arrived. I was not there, of course. I was in a suite at the hotel across the street, with a perfect view of the grand ballroom where the event was being held. I had a live feed from Sarah's camera crew. I was the ghost in the machine, the director in the wings. The ballroom was a sea of beautiful people, influencers, and media. Amelia was the star of the show. She glided through the room in a glittering silver gown, her smile radiant, her confidence restored. She had dismissed the strange occurrences at the house as stress. She was on the cusp of everything she had ever wanted. She was untouchable. The CEO of Elysian, a man with a smile as slick as his hair, took the stage. He gave a rousing speech about wellness, authenticity, and the future of holistic living. Then he called Amelia to the stage. "And now it is my great honor to introduce the new face of Elysian, a woman who embodies grace, strength, and authentic living, the incredible Amelia Vance." The room erupted in applause. Amelia walked onto the stage, beaming, tears of joy in her eyes. She signed the massive, oversized contract with a flourish. The cameras flashed. It was the peak of her life. And then, Evelyn Reed, my lawyer, made her entrance. She didn't run or shout. She walked calmly, deliberately, to the side of the stage, flanked by two stern-looking men. She handed a file to the event's security chief. There was a hushed, urgent conversation. The security chief's eyes went wide. He nodded grimly and walked on the stage, whispering into the CEO's ear. The CEO's slick smile vanished. He looked out into the crowd, a look of pure panic on his face. He leaned into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he stammered, "we seem to have a slight technical difficulty. Please enjoy the refreshments. We will resume shortly." But it was too late. The journalist, Sarah, was already moving. "Mr. Sterling," she called out, her voice cutting through the confused murmurs of the crowd. "Is it true that Elysian is under investigation for fraudulent marketing claims, and that your star spokesperson, Amelia Vance, is currently the subject of a legal action for elder fraud and misappropriation of funds?" The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. All eyes turned to Amelia, whose face had frozen in a grotesque mask of horror. At that moment, Mr. Gable, who had been waiting for his cue, walked to the front of the room. He was not shouting. He simply began handing out copies of a press release to the stunned journalists. The headline was simple and devastating. "Influencer Amelia Vance accused of fraud in death hoax scheme. Family trust invokes matriarch protocol." The press release laid out the entire sordid story. The fake obituary, the fraudulent GoFundMe, and the cold legal reality of the matriarch protocol. It stated, in clear, undeniable language, that as of 1 week ago, Amelia Vance and her husband, Thomas Vance, had been completely and irrevocably disinherited. They were not wealthy. They were broke. The room erupted into chaos. The influencers, who just moments before were fawning over Amelia, now looked at her with a mixture of horror and morbid fascination. Their phones were out, no longer to take pictures of her, but to record her spectacular public implosion. Amelia stood on the stage, paralyzed, as her entire world burned down around her. The multi-million-dollar contract she had just signed was now a worthless piece of paper. The brand she had built her life on was now a toxic asset. Her name, once a symbol of aspirational living, was now a synonym for fraud. I watched it all from my hotel window, a quiet, satisfied smile on my face. She had tried to write my final chapter, but I was the author, and this was the plot twist she never saw coming. The Elysian launch party was not a launch, it was a detonation. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. The video of Amelia frozen on stage as the accusations flew went viral before the night was over. The hashtags #AmeliaHoax and #GrifterGuru were trending worldwide by morning. Her empire, built on a carefully curated image of authenticity, had been exposed as a sham, and her adoring followers turned on her with a viciousness only the internet can muster. Her sponsors dropped her in a cascade of public statements. "We do not condone this kind of deceptive behavior. Our brand values transparency and integrity." The comments on her social media pages, once a stream of praise and heart emojis, became a torrent of hate, of accusations, of pure, unadulterated rage from people who felt they had been duped by her performance of grief. But the public humiliation was only the beginning. The real pain was the financial one. The day after the party, Mr. Gable enacted the final stages of the matriarch protocol. It wasn't just that their income stream from the trust was cut off. It was a systematic dismantling of their entire life. The lease on their luxury apartment, which was in the trust's name, was terminated. They were given 48 hours to vacate. The sports car Thomas drove, also owned by the trust, was repossessed from the building's garage. The credit cards were canceled, leaving them with nothing but the clothes on their backs and the mountain of personal debt they had accrued from Amelia's shopping sprees. I returned to my home. The house was quiet. The minimalist furniture they had bought was still there, a monument to their fleeting, fraudulent reign. I hired a team to remove it all and donate it to a charity for homeless shelters. I brought my own beloved, outdated furniture out of the attic. The house, slowly, began to feel like mine again. A week later, there was a knock on my door. It was Thomas, my son. He looked like a ghost. He was pale, thin, and his eyes were hollowed out with a shame so profound it was almost a physical presence. He was alone. "Mom," he whispered, his voice cracking. He couldn't look at me. I didn't invite him in. I just stood in the doorway. "What do you want, Thomas?" "She's gone," he said. "Amelia, she left. The day after the party. She packed a bag and just disappeared. She said I was a failure, that I was weak, that I had let you destroy her." I felt a flicker of something, a distant echo of motherly pity for the boy he once was. But it was quickly extinguished by the cold memory of his silence, his cowardice. "And what do you think, Thomas?" I asked quietly. "Do you think I destroyed her?" He finally looked up at me, and his eyes were filled with tears, real tears, for the first time. "No," he said, his voice choked with a sob. "She destroyed herself, and she destroyed me. I let her. I stood by and I let her disrespect you. I let her use you. I let her try to erase you, because I was a coward. I was so afraid of losing her. I lost myself instead." He sank to his knees on my doorstep, a broken man. "Mom, I am so sorry. I have nothing. I am nothing. I have nowhere to go." I looked down at my son, the boy I had raised to be a good man, now kneeling in the wreckage of his own weak choices. I thought of the love I had for him, a love that had been so unconditional it had almost destroyed me. I thought of my grandson, Leo, who deserved a father, not a shadow. My revenge on Amelia was complete. But what was I to do with the collateral damage? What was I to do with my own son? This was a choice that wasn't in David's will. This was a choice that was entirely mine. The choice between justice and mercy. The choice between being an executioner and being a mother. And I didn't know which one to choose. I didn't let him in. Not then. I looked down at the weeping man who was my son, and a cold, hard part of me, a part I hadn't known existed before Amelia, felt nothing but a grim satisfaction. He had made his bed. Let him lie in it. "You are right," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "You have nowhere to go. And that is a consequence of your own making. You stood by and watched your wife declare me dead. You posted a tribute to my memory while I was still breathing. You chose her. Now you can live with that choice." I closed the door in his face. It was one of the hardest things I have ever done. I leaned against the door, my heart pounding, listening to the sound of his ragged sobs on the other side. A part of me, the mother in me, wanted to rip the door open and hold him. But the woman Amelia had created, the woman who had to orchestrate her own resurrection, knew that true growth can only happen in the scorched earth of absolute loss. Mercy, I realized, could be a crueler prison than justice. For the next month, I heard nothing from him. I hired a private investigator, not out of concern, but out of a cold, clinical need to know. The report was grim. Thomas was living out of his car. He had been fired from his junior marketing job due to the scandal. He was picking up odd jobs, manual labor, cash-in-hand work to survive. He, the man who had vacationed in St. Bart's, was now eating at soup kitchens. He was paying his penance. During this time, I focused on myself, on reclaiming my life. I went to my real funeral. I went to the cemetery where Amelia had, with breathtaking audacity, purchased a burial plot for me next to my David. I stood before the empty space and had the headstone removed. It felt like a final act of defiance against her attempt to erase me. I also began the slow, painful process of healing my relationship with my friends and family, the ones who had mourned my death. I called each one of them. I explained, without going into the vengeful details, that there had been a terrible and unfortunate misunderstanding caused by my daughter-in-law's fragile mental state. Some were confused, some were angry, but my truest friends, the ones who had known me for a lifetime, understood. They saw the steel in my spine that hadn't been there before, and they welcomed me back, not with pity, but with a newfound respect. But my biggest project was the money, the $5 million portfolio. It was now a symbol not of wealth, but of the battle I had won. It needed a purpose beyond my own comfort. I met with Mr. Gable. I want to create something that Amelia would despise, I told him. Something that represents everything she is not. I want to build a legacy of genuine wellness, not the performative, shallow version she sold to her followers. And so, the Margaret Vance Foundation for Authentic Living was born. It was an anti-influencer foundation. We didn't fund glamorous retreats. We funded community gardens in food deserts. We provided scholarships for young women from low-income backgrounds to become nurses, teachers, and social workers. We sponsored financial literacy programs for women escaping controlling relationships. We were investing in substance, not image. It was in the midst of this new, purposeful life that Thomas reappeared. It was 3 months after I had closed the door on him. He didn't come to my house. I found him. He was volunteering at one of the very soup kitchens our foundation had just given a grant to. I saw him from across the room. He was thinner, his hands were calloused, and his expensive haircut was gone. He was serving soup, his eyes focused on his task, a quiet humility in his posture that I had never seen before. He looked real. For the first time, he didn't see me. I watched him for a long time. I saw him speak kindly to the people in line. I saw him stay late to help clean the kitchen. This was not the weak, spoiled boy who had let his wife walk all over his mother. This was a man being forged in the fires of his own failure. I walked up to him. "Thomas," I said softly. He looked up and his eyes widened. He didn't look scared or ashamed, just weary. "Mom," he said, his voice quiet. "You look well," I lied. He looked terrible, but he also looked stronger. "I'm working on it," he said. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't ask for anything. He just looked at me, a silent question in his eyes. "The foundation I started," I said. "We're looking for a project manager for our new community outreach program. It's hard work, long hours, and the pay is terrible." He just stared at me, his mind trying to process it. "It's not a handout, Thomas," I said, my voice firm. "It's a job. You'll have to apply like everyone else. You'll have to prove you're the right person for it. You'll have to earn it. Every single day." Tears welled up in his eyes, but this time, they were not tears of self-pity. They were tears of a man being offered a single, fragile thread of hope. "Okay, Mom," he whispered. "Okay." It was not forgiveness. It was not a reconciliation. It was a beginning, a chance for him to rebuild himself, not with my money, but with his own 2 hands. He had a long road ahead of him, but for the first time, he was walking it on his own. Thomas took the job, or rather, he earned it. He went through 3 rounds of interviews with the foundation's board, a board that had no idea he was my son. He was hired on his own merit. He started at the bottom, organizing food drives and coordinating volunteers. He worked harder than I had ever seen him work in his life. He was quiet, diligent, and deeply humbled. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a quiet competence. Our relationship was formal, professional. He called me Mrs. Vance in the office. We did not speak of the past. We did not speak of Amelia. We spoke of grant proposals and outreach strategies. It was a strange, delicate dance, but it was a start. He was slowly, painstakingly rebuilding the bridge he had burned. One day, about 6 months into his new job, he came to me with a proposal. "Mrs. Vance," he said, standing formally in front of my desk, "I've identified a gap in our services. We help people with food and education, but there's a huge need for transitional housing, especially for young people who have aged out of the foster care system." He presented a detailed, well-researched plan to purchase and renovate an old derelict apartment building and turn it into a safe, supportive housing facility. It was brilliant. It was compassionate. It was exactly the kind of project the foundation was created for. "This is excellent work, Thomas," I said, my voice professional, but my heart swelling with a pride I hadn't felt in years. "The board will approve this immediately." As he turned to leave, I said, "Thomas?" He stopped and turned back. "Your father would have been very proud of this," I said softly. He just nodded, a lump forming in his throat, and walked out. The bridge was getting stronger. While Thomas was rebuilding his life, Amelia was not. The whispers of her fate were a constant, grim background noise. After she vanished, she had apparently tried to relaunch her career under a new name, a new online persona. But the internet never forgets. Every time she tried to gain traction, someone would post the link to the news articles about the death hoax. She was a digital ghost, a pariah in the only world she had ever valued. The last I heard, from a piece of gossip passed through a friend of a friend, was that she was living in a cheap apartment in a dreary, run-down city, working as a telemarketer, selling scammy vacation packages. Her beautiful face was now just a voice on a phone, a voice that most people hung up on. It was a fittingly ironic fate for a woman who had built her life on empty words. I never felt a shred of pity for her. Her exile was self-imposed, a direct consequence of her own choices. She had worshipped at the altar of image, and she had been consumed by it. My life, on the other hand, was full. The foundation was thriving, and my relationship with Thomas was slowly, carefully healing. He never asked for anything more than his meager salary. He lived in a small apartment above the soup kitchen where I had found him. He had sold his designer clothes and now wore the simple, practical attire of a man who worked with his hands. And then there was the call that changed everything once more. It was from Mr. Gable. "Margaret," he said, his voice grim, "I've just received a notification. Amelia Vance has filed for divorce from Thomas, and she is suing for spousal support." I laughed, a short, sharp, humorless sound. "On what grounds? They have no shared assets. He has no income to speak of." "That's not what she's suing for," Mr. Gable said, his voice heavy. "She's not suing him. She's suing the trust. She's suing you." The lawsuit was a masterpiece of audacious fiction. Amelia, with the help of a notoriously sleazy tabloid lawyer, had concocted a story so ludicrous it was almost brilliant. She claimed that she had been the victim of a vast, elaborate conspiracy. She alleged that I, a manipulative and controlling matriarch, had been jealous of her youth and success, that I had intentionally trapped her and Thomas in a cycle of debt, all while hiding my vast fortune. Her central claim was that the Matriarch Protocol was an illegal and immoral document designed to enslave my son. She argued that Thomas's current low-income job at the foundation was a form of indentured servitude, a way for me to keep him under my thumb. Therefore, she, as his soon-to-be ex-wife, was entitled to a portion of the imprisoned future earnings he should have had. She wasn't just suing for spousal support. She was trying to break the trust, to have the entire matriarch protocol thrown out by the court. She was trying to get her hands on the fortune one last time. "She's desperate," Mr. Gable said. "This is a Hail Mary pass. It has no legal merit, but it will be ugly. She will drag you, Thomas, and the foundation through the mud." "Let her," I said, my voice calm. "Let her try. She thinks she can still play the victim. It's time to show the world what a real victim looks like." The legal battle became a media circus. Amelia gave tearful interviews to tabloid shows, painting herself as a young, naive woman who had married into a toxic and manipulative family. She was brilliant at it. She cried on cue. She spoke of her deep love for Thomas and her profound respect for me, a respect that was met with cruelty and deception. She was trying to win in the court of public opinion, the only court she had ever respected. For a while it worked. A small but vocal contingent of her former followers rallied around her, creating hashtags like #Justice for Amelia. I remained silent. I gave no interviews. I made no statements. I let her build her narrative, let her weave her web of lies. I knew that the higher she climbed, the harder she would fall. Thomas was a rock. He was subpoenaed, of course. He was forced to give a deposition. Amelia's lawyer was brutal. trying to paint him as a brainwashed, abused son, a puppet under my control. Mr. Vance, the lawyer sneered, isn't it true that your mother forced you to take a low-paying job at her own foundation? Isn't it true that you are financially dependent on her? I watched the video of the deposition later. Thomas's response was quiet, dignified, and devastating. "No, sir," he said, his voice steady. "My mother offered me an opportunity to earn back my self-respect. The life I lived before was not my own. It was a fantasy, funded by my mother's generosity, a generosity my ex-wife and I mistook for an entitlement. I am not financially dependent on my mother. For the first time in my life, I am financially independent. It is a freedom I would not trade for all the money in the world." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't get angry. He just spoke the simple, unvarnished truth. And it was more powerful than all of Amelia's theatrics. The case finally went to court. Amelia arrived each day dressed in demure, conservative outfits, her face a mask of sorrowful victimhood. She was playing a role, and she was playing it for the cameras that gathered on the courthouse steps. Her lawyer argued passionately about the unconscionable nature of the trust. He called me to the stand. For 2 days, he grilled me. He tried to portray me as a cold, calculating monster who had engineered my own son's downfall. "Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy, "did you feel no remorse as you watched your only son lose his home, his career, his wife?" I looked at him, and then I looked at the jury. "I felt profound sadness," I said, my voice clear and strong. I was sad that the boy I had raised had become a man who would stand by and allow his wife to fraudulently declare his own mother dead for financial gain. My actions were not about punishment. They were about consequences. I did not take away his life. I simply stopped paying for the false one he was living. The final day of the trial was the day we sprung our final trap. Mr. Gable called a surprise rebuttal witness, a woman named Dr. Alicia Sharma. "Dr. Sharma," Mr. Gable began, "what is your profession?" "I am a clinical psychologist specializing in narcissistic personality disorder and pathological gaslighting," she replied. Amelia, sitting at the plaintiff's table, suddenly looked very, very nervous. "And have you had any professional interaction with the plaintiff, Amelia Vance?" Mr. Gable asked. "Yes," Dr. Sharma said. "She was my patient for 2 years before she married the defendant's son." The courtroom buzzed. Amelia's lawyer jumped to his feet, shouting about doctor-patient confidentiality. "The confidentiality was waived, Your Honor," Mr. Gable said calmly, producing a document. "When Miss Vance filed this lawsuit and put her own emotional and mental state at issue, she waived that privilege. Dr. Sharma is here to testify about Miss Vance's documented history of manipulative behaviors." The judge allowed it. For the next hour, Dr. Sharma, with cold clinical precision, dismantled Amelia's entire victim narrative. She testified about Amelia's deep-seated entitlement, her lack of genuine empathy, and her propensity for using emotional manipulation to achieve her goals. She presented notes from sessions where Amelia had openly discussed her strategy of marrying well as a career move. It was a character assassination of the most brutal and factual kind. Amelia just sat there, her face ashen, as her own therapist exposed the truth of who she was to the world. When Dr. Sharma was finished, Mr. Gable had one final piece of evidence. It was a single audio file. "Your Honor," he said. "This is a recording of a phone call made by Miss Vance to a friend, the day after Mrs. Vance's funeral." He played the clip. The courtroom was silent as they heard Amelia's voice, not the sad, gentle voice she used in her interviews, but her real voice, sharp, triumphant, and cruel. "I can't believe how easy it was. They all bought it. The old woman is gone, and the money is all mine. Thomas is so wrapped around my finger, he'd believe me if I told him the sky was green. We are set for life." The recording ended. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Amelia had been condemned by her own words. There was nothing left to say. The judge's ruling was not just a dismissal, it was a demolition. He threw out Amelia's lawsuit, calling it frivolous, malicious, and an abuse of the judicial process. He didn't stop there. He ordered her to pay my entire legal fees, a sum that was well into the six figures, and in a final crushing blow, he took the highly unusual step of sanctioning her for perjury and filing a fraudulent lawsuit, forwarding the case to the district attorney for criminal investigation. Amelia didn't just lose. She was annihilated. She stumbled out of the courtroom, not to a crowd of supportive fans, but to a swarm of reporters shouting questions. "Amelia, is it true you faked a death for money? What do you say to the accusations from your own therapist?" She didn't answer. She just fled, a hunted animal, the flash of the cameras like a barrage of gunfire. That was the last time the world saw Amelia Vance. Her digital footprint was wiped clean within 24 hours. Her social media, her blogs, her entire online existence, gone. She became a ghost, just as she had tried to make me one. The weeks that followed were quiet. The noise of the scandal faded, replaced by the peaceful rhythm of my new life. Thomas continued his work at the foundation, his dedication unwavering. Our relationship had found a new, quiet equilibrium, built on a foundation of mutual respect rather than obligation. We didn't talk about Amelia. We didn't need to. Her chapter was closed. One evening, we were having dinner at my house. It was the anniversary of my husband David's death. We weren't mourning. We were remembering. We shared stories of his kindness, his humor, his quiet wisdom. "He would be so proud of you, Mom," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not just for what you did, but for how you did it. You didn't just protect his money. You protected his legacy. You protected me, even when I didn't deserve it." "You always deserved it, Thomas," I said, reaching across the table and taking his hand. "You just got lost for a while, but you found your way back, and that is a strength your father would have admired more than any financial success." A few months later, I received a small, tattered postcard in the mail. It had no return address. The postmark was from a small, forgotten town in the middle of nowhere. The handwriting was messy, almost illegible. It was from Amelia. The postcard had a picture of a bleak, dusty landscape on the front. On the back, there were only 3 words, scrawled in what looked like a hurry. You were right. That was it. No apology, no explanation, just a final, bitter admission of defeat. It wasn't an act of remorse. It was the last, desperate cry of a narcissist who had finally, truly, run out of people to blame. I didn't keep the postcard. I tossed it into the fireplace and watched it turn to ash. She was no longer a part of my story. My life now is fuller and richer than I could have ever imagined. The Margaret Vance Foundation has grown into a national organization, a testament to the idea that true wellness comes not from expensive retreats and empty slogans, but from community, purpose, and financial independence. I am not a lifestyle influencer. I am a life changer. Thomas is now the executive director of the foundation. He has a passion and a vision that have surpassed all my expectations. He met someone, a social worker named Maria who works at one of our shelters. She is kind, intelligent, and her eyes hold a genuine warmth. When he brought her to meet me, she didn't look at my house or my things. She looked at me, and she smiled. Last week was my 72nd birthday. We didn't have a lavish party. We had a small gathering in my garden. Thomas, Maria, Mr. Gable, and the small, dedicated team from the foundation. My friends, my real family. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the roses, Thomas stood up to make a toast. He raised his glass. "To my mother," he said, his eyes meeting mine across the table. "A woman who taught me the difference between wealth and worth. A woman who went through hell and came back not with vengeance, but with a purpose. A woman who, when the world tried to declare her dead, showed them all what it truly means to be alive." As they all raised their glasses, I looked around at the faces of the people I loved. I thought of the journey, the pain, the betrayal, and the ultimate quiet victory. I thought of my husband David and his fortress of love. I thought of Amelia, a sad, forgotten ghost in her own self-made purgatory. She had called me useless. She had tried to erase me. But in the end, her cruelty was the very thing that forced me to reclaim my own power, to find my own voice, to build a legacy far greater than I had ever dreamed. She thought she was writing my obituary. She had no idea she was actually writing my origin story. My name is Margaret, and my story is far from over. It's just getting started. If you liked my story, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I'd love to know how far my story of survival and justice has traveled. And what do you think is the most powerful form of revenge? I'm always curious to read your opinions. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Until the next story, take care, with love and respect.